Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and one of the biggest core features coming with the next expansion is the idea of hero talents or hero specs. In a way, they kind of function like hero subspecs, where we have a class divided into different specs with new ways to modify those specs in deeper way. The hero spec system or the hero talent system is going to be the new way that we'll be able to progress our characters with greater power from level 70 to 80 in War Within. These are going to function just like any other talents, and you'll be able to switch them up as much as you want to, though a lot of them will have quite a bit of the thematic value to them, as they will open new doors for very specified playstyles and even add some thematic components to better define your chosen class and spec identity. In today's video, I wanted to start our coverage of some of the available hero specs that we could take a look at from the alpha. While not every class has their full array of hero specs available, the class of Death Knight has had access to theirs for quite a bit. And I want to start with the class of Death Knight specifically, almost like an example, to give you a better idea of what the hero specs look like. Starting off with the Sinlan, the Rider of the Apocalypse, and the Deathbringer playstyles. But right before we dive into some of the Death Knight hero talents, most of you guys watching these kind of alpha videos are still not subscribed. However, the more of you remind, the more of you do, so let's keep it going. Subscribe to the channel and ring the bell if you're watching these videos anyway. Especially if you want to get more regular content regarding Dragonflight patch 10.26, 10.7, Season 4, or any of the future War Within updates. First, we have the most flavorful option available for Death Knights, Rider of the Apocalypse. Spending runes is a chance to call forth one of the 4 horsemen to aid you for 10 seconds. And each of the horsemen has a unique effect that slightly changes your rotation. Or rather, they encourage you to focus on specific targets and provide you with a variety of conveniences. And each of your hero talents can empower all of your riders. With Morgreen, we have a champion that actually hits quite hard in comparison to the rest. He provides you with a free death and decay aura around him, which lets you gain benefits from death and decay effects, such as class buffs or even cleave mechanics. Nazgûl provides you with an active strength buff, and slaying foes and spending runes while he is active empowers that buff further. Trollbane will place your targets in a chain of ice, making them take more damage from you, giving you an extra focused target. Attacking the target that is chained by Trollbane also causes that target to pulse with Shadow Frost damage, adding some cleave into your overall rotation. Whitebane places a disease of undeath upon your target, and undeath gains stacks doing more damage over time. Hitting the disease targets with your Obliterate or Scourge Strike causes the disease to gain an additional stack, and the disease by itself can actually hit very hard, which makes it a priority for you to focus that target as soon as possible. As a Death Knight, you get to become one of the horsemen, which allows you a talent that lets you ride on the horse while staying in combat, but only works in the open world. While this talent doesn't work in things like dungeons, raids, and I assume as well as in PvP, it does allow you the thematics of becoming a full-blown horseman. The other talent, however, is going to be a little bit more useful, as it turns Death's Advance into a 10-second movement speed buff, which is super good for Death Knights, who are generally one of the slower classes in the game. This is a game changer talent for the class indefinitely. It's definitely one of the best feelings on a Death Knight to be able to move freely for 10 seconds, unable to be slowed or impeded by enemy abilities while charging on your fallen steed. Summoning Horsemen can also protect the Death Knight with a stacking damage buff, or even apply anti-magic shell at a reduced effectiveness. You can also prolong the Horseman's uptime or deal additional damage whenever you summon 2 of them at a time. You also get mechanical talents like a cooldown reduction to Horn of Winter for Frost Death Knights or Unholy Blight for Unholy, but also a death and decay cooldown reduction, which is also nice for AoE. Hungering Thirst is going to buff your diseases as well as your runic power spenders. And your final capstone for the Horseman talents is going to allow your major ability, being Army of Frostworm's Fury, to summon all 4 horsemen at once for 20 seconds. Which is a great talent to have, especially if you want to maximize the value of these horsemen and use them during key moments, but also reduces the unlock and the feel bad factor of the RNG nature of the hero talent. Overall, the proc rate of this hero talent I found, at least in dungeons, to be generous enough, as the horsemen are pretty regularly summoned within boss fights but also outside of major encounters as well. Each of the 4 horsemen feels great to have around, as they don't disrupt your rotation. Instead, they help you adapt or even augment your playstyle, and the death and decay from Morgreen in particular has been one of the best feelings whenever you play the 4 horsemen playstyle as a Frosty Death Knight. The movement buffs in particular is the biggest highlight of this hero spec. It feels insane to have such mobility on a class such as the Death Knight. Overall, the fantasy of the rider is fantastic, especially as Unholy, since Unholy presents itself as the commander leading a charge of an army, fueled by all of their undead minions rising from below. But now you have these 4 riders by your side as part of your massive battalion of undead, leading to all of your pets doing a far more damage than the Death Knight, at least when it comes to some of the early alpha numbers. Next, I want to take a look at the Deathbringer hero spec, which is inspired by the expansion of Shadowlands. The Death Knight gets to slice into the target's very soul, applying a Reaper's Mark upon them. Dealing frost and shadow damage to the marked target causes that mark to build in stacks, and after 12 seconds or after achieving 40 stacks of the mark, you do a ton of damage per stack. Reaper's Mark then travels to an unmarked enemy if your current target with the mark died or if it exploded on an enemy below 35% health, creating some fantastic execute value. For the most part, Reaper's Mark is a single target ability, but it has a lot of talents that help empower your AoE and cleave damage, such as the talents like Wave of Souls, which causes Reaper's Mark to send out a dark wave forwards and backwards away from your target, which looks very much like Maw-esque or Jailer-esque shadow magic that we saw a couple of expansions ago. The wave will do damage both ways, and on the way back it will always critically strike, making your foes take additional Shadow Frost damage. Reaper's Mark Explosion also causes a piece of the target's soul to be ripped out, dealing damage to all enemies that it passes through in a similar way that how Arthas would rip the souls out of his victims. Enemies with lost souls will also do less damage to the Death Knight. Frostweaver and Blood Plague has a chance to do 30% more damage as Shadow Frost damage. Reaper's Mark Explosion will deal more damage against lower enemy targets while also applying Soul Reaper for free, which leans heavily into this execute value. You got a couple of choice talents, such as being able to increase the amount of stacks you can maintain from icy talents for bigger auto attack value, or cause your diseases to tick down on the enemy faster for more consistent output. The talent of Death's Bargain can allow Death Knights a cheat death mechanic with Death Pact, or you can forego it to simply reduce magic and physical damage when spending your resources. You can also reduce the cooldown of Lichborn or gain an anti-caster AMS defenses. The capstone of Deathbringer is Exterminate. After Reaper's Mark explodes, your next 2 spec abilities such as Obliterate for Frost Death Knight will cost 1 rune and will summon 2 scythes to strike at your target. The first scythe strikes at your target directly for a bunch of Shadow Frost damage, has a 30% chance to reapply Reaper's Mark instantly to that target. The second scythe strikes all enemies near your target, doing additional Shadow Frost damage. Exterminate and Reaper's Mark can then be further empowered with Swift End, which reduces the rune cost of Reaper's Mark and reducing its cooldown by 30 seconds to make it more consistent. Or go with Painful Death, giving Exterminate the ability to empower 2 spec abilities, while increasing the chance that Reaper's Mark will be reapplied to your target. A choice between the more consistent uses of Reaper's Mark or a burstier version of the ability with a bit of RNG that might let it reapply itself multiple times in a row. And getting the sweet resets and reapplications of Reaper's Mark is a satisfying combo, and it feels super exciting every single time it happens, leading to far burstier damage windows. Overall, during my time testing, I found the Deathbringer Death Knight to be far more fun than I anticipated. It fits Frost Death Knight well in particular, as it plays well into your Pillar of Burst windows, and fits well into their single target focus rotation, which they use in raids but also in dungeons. For both Blood and Frost, Reaper's Mark doesn't disrupt your basic rotation either. Instead, it can be weaved in effortlessly, even when the Reaper's Mark bounces from target to target, shifting your focus around in bigger group situations. Overall, it's a super fun to set up an explosive execute window, and leaning heavily into the Soul Reaper gameplay allows Death Knights to explore an execute heavy playstyle. Next we have the Sun Lan, and the Sun Lan are a vampiric dark falling elves who manipulate blood and shadow magic to their whim. They were a prominent force of vampiric beings under the command of Arthas during Wrath of Lich King, leading to their addition to the Death Knights talent trees. Available to Blood Death Knights for their obvious vampiric roots, but also to the Unholy Death Knights for their dealings with shadow magic and manifesting undead beings to life. The primary mechanic of the Sun Lan is the Vampiric Strike ability, where Death Coil and Death Strike have a chance to convert your next Hard Strike or Scourge Strike into a Vampiric Strike. Vampiric Strike does pure shadow damage, healing the Death Knight for a portion of their health, granting them a stack of Essence of the Blood Queen, which is a haste buff that can be stacked up to 10% haste with a 20-second duration. An easy way to activate Vampiric Strike besides Death Coil and Death Strikes is from the Gift of the Sinlayan Capstone effect, where during Vampiric Blood or Dark Transformation you have access to Vampiric Strike at all times, and Essence of the Queen haste buff is increased by 150%. The main mechanic of this hero spec is to use your major cooldowns to stack up the haste buff, and then weave a few procs of Vampiric Strike outside of those major cooldowns to prolong the buff long enough until your cooldowns are back to re-enter the Gift of Sinlayan window. A lot of your other talents also empower Vampiric Strike or Gift of Sinlayan, with Infliction of Sorrow causing Vampiric Strike to consume your active diseases on the target, dealing 200% of the remaining damage, requiring you to refresh your disease more often rotationally. Though during Gift of Sinlayan, Vampiric Strike instead extends the duration of that disease and causes your disease to do 20% of the remaining damage with every Vampiric Strike. When it comes to resources, Heartstrike and Scourgestrike have a small chance per stack of the Essence of the Blood Queen buff to refund the rune cost. This chance, however, is doubled when the ability becomes a Vampiric Strike. Standing in Death and Decay will increase your defenses but also give you a better chance to gain Vampiric Strike buffs. Runic Power Spenders are also amplified for every stack of Essence of the Blood Queen. Heartstrike and Scourgestrike also extend the duration of Essence of the Blood Queen, though Vampiric Strike is far more effective at extending the buff. Vampiric Strike also has a chance to summon a Blood Beast to attack your target, which then explodes for a portion of its damage that is done. The beast can then be further empowered, or you can empower your Runic Power Spenders after attacking a low health target. Lastly, we have two utility choices, for either a better version of Icebound Fortitude that gains cooldown reduction for slain foes, or a Vampiric Aura, which causes Lichborn to apply bonus leech to 4 allies within 12 yards of the Death Knight, offering for some group utility. And now lastly, you can also get an enhanced version of Battle Res, which revives your allies with full health, but also with an absorbed shield on top of it, or to gain a better version of Death's Advance and Wraithwalk, increasing your overall movement speed. And after playing a little bit with the Sinlayan Death Knight, I walked away with two different experiences, one for Blood and one for Unholy. For Blood, this is a very passive hero spec, which synergizes incredibly well with the Blood's playstyle. For one, it turns Vampiric Blood into an offensive skill rather than a defensive one, which doesn't really fit the defensive nature of a Blood Death Knight if you're a tank main. But it does create a fun, offensive-focused gameplay loop, and I think it's going to bring out forward Vampiric Blood as your very first defensive cooldown that you'll try to maximize as much as possible in every combat encounter. And spamming Vamp Strike in Blood is effortless and easy to track as a Blood DK, since Death and Decay is already part of your core gameplay. Watching out for Blood Queen stacks isn't nearly as important since you're spamming Heartstrike or Vampiric Strike as much as you can, and when a Vampiric Strike does consume your disease in full, it can be easily reapplied with things like Blood Boil. So for Blood Death Knight, this plays a lot more passively than actively. But playing Sinlayan as Unholy I found a little bit more challenging, and this is partially because we are in the alpha of War Within. See, Vampiric Strike procs currently do not show up in any visible way on your bars or on your screen, and the only way to track Vampiric Strike on your bars is through Gift of Sinlayan windows, but otherwise getting random procs of the ability, you don't really know when it's procced and when it's available because there's no visual attached to it right now. And tracking the ability is crucial to this playstyle working well, because you have to take into account with the dot consumption effect of Infliction of Sorrow, but you also need to be able to maintain Essence of the Blood Queen stacks at all times, and knowing when you have Vampiric Strike can help that as well. Unholy Death Knights also generally are a pretty high maintenance spec as is, as you need to be able to effectively track your Apocalypse windows, Dark Transformation, and even Summon Gargoyle windows if you're talented into it. But you're also managing runic power as well as runes and efficiently trying to maximize festering wound stacks against the target. So trying to weave in Scourgestrike that spontaneously consume all your dots, and then having to track Death and Decay at all times outside of AoE because of new talents, while also maintaining Essence of the Blood Queen felt like a lot to manage at once. But once Vampiric Strike can be tracked properly, I think Sinlayan Unholy would work out well. And honestly, it could also be a user error, as you may just need to create a build that complements the Sinlayan playstyle. And we may even see Unholy Death Knight go through rotational changes so we can better optimize the Gift of Sinlayan windows. Overall, I'd say it's not worth writing off the spec entirely, as we are still in alpha and more Death Knight changes are yet to come over the next few weeks, possibly even in this week's alpha build as well. But with that, that's going to be everything we got so far regarding the Death Knights 3 hero specs. Overall, I'm very pleased with everything that I've been able to test out on the alpha so far. Very excited about the first two that we covered, which is the Rider as well as the Deathbringer. The Rider of the Apocalypse, however, is the one that stands out apart from the crowd. It is the one that brings in the most flavor to the spec of Death Knight, while also improves on one of the core aspects that holds him back from the other playstyles, which is their lack of mobility, and also finds ways to integrate new mechanics that add convenience rather than disruption into your already established DPS rotations. But at the end of the day, I want to hear your guys' opinions in the comments down below. What are your thoughts on the Death Knight's hero specs thus far, and which one out of the three is the one that stands out to you the most? As per usual, if you guys enjoyed this video or found it informative, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. And as always, in the description of every single video and live stream, we have a link to our Discord community channel. Probably the best place to reach out to me directly in case you want to let me know what you thought about this video or hang out with the rest of the community to discuss some of the upcoming changes. Join our Discord to become part of the community. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in another video.